All right, well, hello everyone. It is March, what is it, 27th? It's March 27th in our new reality. This is fine. It's fine. Everything's fine, right? It's funny, I don't know how many of you are experiencing this, but the days are getting more difficult to distinguish. I saw a neighbor and I just asked her how she was the other day, and she says, I don't even know if it's Tuesday or Wednesday. And I was like, totally get it. Understand. I know exactly what you're talking about because I have no idea sometimes what day it is. It's like a weird sort of more relaxing in a way, right? Like it's still new, and it's like there's you get to be around your kids more. You're here. You're kind of you can sleep in because you're not going to work out. Or of course I'm working out. I'm doing a lot of fitness activity, obviously, but but you wake up and you're trying to. It's just a completely different reality all the time, and I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't get used to it. That's what I think. Is like, why get used to it? Like, let's just always be like confused and intrigued by it because we shouldn't think of this as normal. I hope we don't think of this as normal. It's just a grind, right? Let's just grind. Let's just go through this one by one. So it's fine. I didn't prepare as well as I'd like to, but there's a bunch of things to talk about. I'd also like to hear from you. If you have any questions, and maybe you want to come on later, even too, we'll have you come on and ask any questions or talk about what you're dealing with. Um, okay, port question. That's interesting. So a couple of updates. We were talking a lot last week about an outbreak of sorts among local Democratic Party leaders. There's a lot of them who apparently got this infection, including the chairman of the Democratic Party, Will Rodriguez Kennedy. He's just been released from the hospital as an update. Steve Padilla, the sort of first big name local Democrat, he's the Chula Vista City Councilman. He's also the chairman of the Coastal Commission. So I'm sure you all know what the Coastal Commission is, but if you don't, it's an agency that oversees access and development along the coastal, the tide zones in these areas. So places, in Ocean Beach, La Jolla, and stuff like that. If you want to build anywhere there, you usually have to get permission from the Coastal Commission. And Padilla was the chairman of that. So they have that. They also protect access to the coast and stuff like that. So Padilla is the chairman of that agency for the whole state. And so he was traveling around for that. And that's, partly he either got it when he was traveling or he got it and then traveled to the Coastal Commission meeting. Anyway, he still hasn't been released from the hospital. And so, a lot of us are still wondering and worried about that. That'll be really interesting to follow and something we're all hoping has a good outcome because, like we said, Will Rodriguez Kennedy, the chair of the Democratic Party, he was released from the hospital. Seems like he's doing well. And then Kelvin Barrios had a brief visit to the hospital, also had the COVID-19, and he's been released and he's fine. He seems to be recovering. But then we just heard yesterday that Andrea Cardenas, she's a Chula Vista City Council candidate, a big Democratic Party activist, that she also tested positive for the COVID-19. So there seemed to be, I don't know what a definition of a cluster was, but it sure seems like there was some version of an outbreak of sorts among Democratic Party leaders. So everyone wishes them well, hopes they recover. It's not a partisan thing at this point. This is humans all working for San Diego, and so we hope they're doing well, and especially thoughts out to Steve Padilla from the Coastal Commission and the city of Chula Vista. So that's something we've been really trying to track closely. You might check out Andrea Cardenas's Facebook post about her experience trying to get a test for the coronavirus after she started to feel bad. So that was something to watch. There was some breaking news just now. Governor Gavin Newsom today issued an executive order banning the enforcement of eviction orders for renters who suffer economically from the COVID-19 epidemic, the pandemic, through May 31st. So there's a couple of caveats. It says this bans the enforcement. You know, if your landlord can evict you, you can get the sheriff to come and do that. So what he's saying is that the sheriff can't do that. So I think he's kind of especially saying he's not actually banning the practice or something. I think is a clear distinction. But it also, to take advantage of this deal, you have to declare in writing no more than 7 days after the rent comes due that the tenant cannot pay their rent due for COVID-19. So they're still obligated to pay that rent after the enforcement moratorium, and they might get evicted after that if it doesn't happen. So it's not like a break. I think there's another group of more progressive left-leaning individuals that might want you to pause, actually just like pause and give a kind of break to rent payers and mortgage payers. So that might be a debate that comes up more. The city of San Diego, of course, did its own moratorium, and the county directed its staff to come up with a moratorium. So I think the long and short of it is you can't get evicted over this period, but there's going to be various efforts to provide relief about what you still have to pay, because you're still going to have to pay. That makes it, it's going to make it hard after this whatever problem. It's not like it's going to rock it up. We did a story earlier this week about a couple of projections that were intriguing about what's going to happen to this outbreak in San Diego and what it might mean for the lockdown or the stay-at-home order that we have. So there was a guy who studies infectious diseases, viruses at San Diego State University. His name is Forrest Rower. He wrote an email. You might have seen this actually on different platforms. This guy wrote an email to his colleagues, kind of projecting what he thought might happen. Well, that went viral. We ended up talking to him to, get a little bit more about it. You can check that out at voicesandiego.org, of course. And he said, basically, he was saying, if you look at the math, we're going to start to have trouble with hospital capacity in about 2 weeks, which makes this week in particular really important to maintain a social distance. Like, in essence being like, it takes about 2 weeks for people who do get this virus to really get to the point, if they do need to go to a hospital, that's when it happens. And so he's saying if the capacity levels prove to be that problem around 2 weeks from now, that means this week's really important. So it was really interesting perspective. But then we got a little bit more specific one from the county of San Diego itself. So the county released a model showing what it would have looked like had they not done what they did to sort of impose these social distance efforts. It says that about April 12th, 2020, they would hit 50% of their bed occupancy. And now they've projected that out that it'll be about May 6th because of what's happened. And so they're not saying anything's getting contained or pulled back. They're saying that the next 6 to 8 weeks are going to be really the defining. There's even 6 weeks from now, even if it's awesome and we cap it, then that still means that 6 weeks plus 1 day is just a little bit better, so it's like the curve it's going to be a grind. My point is, like, sorry, this is going to be a grind. This is going to be several weeks. And so, like, let's just set in, because all the projections are that this is going to need to go on for a while. So, I think it's going to get a little antsy here. I know that, what's living in San Diego without going to the beach and the parks and even just walking your dog to a trail, all that stuff's really important. So, my kids are literally running back and forth. They just finished their class with their teacher, the little virtual engagement. How did that go, buddy? Did you enjoy that class discussion? You want to come over here, Ruby? So this is my daughter, Ruby. Say hi, Ruby.
Hi.
That all? You don't got anything else? So my point is like I know this is everybody's really antsy, but this is gonna be a while. This is gonna be a daily grind. So like let's settle in and get through it one day at a time. Okay, another piece of news. We did a really interesting investigative piece this week. Maya Sri Krishnan. We heard that employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs, a federal agency, we're being counseled to do all the things we're being counseled to do. Stay away from people, 6 feet, try to maintain, don't go to the office, stay at home, all these things. But they're not able to work from home. A lot of them reported to us that they were being forced to, still either take vacation or get to work. And that's particularly interesting because on March 24th message, we got acknowledged that the Dr. Robert Smith, who runs the VA here, he said that he confirmed there are 5 cases of COVID-19 at the Department of Veteran Affairs. And so people were being forced basically to work there, or at least couldn't figure out how not to. And yet it was kind of an outbreak. And these weren't frontline necessarily healthcare workers. So I think that Maya has stumbled onto a beat of sorts with that about, sort of agencies and businesses that are trying to figure out how to handle this, especially agencies that are telling people to stay apart from each other, like the county, which is also having trouble keeping their own people apart from each other. So that was something to watch. I noticed that a lot of these agencies have been talking about all this distancing they're doing. You see a tweet or something from the police department with them like having their meeting spread apart. There was a sort of standoff in my neighborhood yesterday. Around the corner, there was some kind of violent incident or something. They had a big guns out, come out with your hands up kind of thing going on, and they weren't very socially distant. I think when it comes down to some serious stuff, they're gonna pack in as they need. But a lot of these agencies are just having trouble figuring out how to handle it all. We also did a story about serving seniors there, and some of the politicians were a little bit worried about Serving Seniors, which is a nonprofit that delivers and serves a lot of seniors food and other services. And there were Nathan Fletcher from the county and Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, his wife, who's an assemblywoman. They both raised a little bit of concerns about whether Serving Seniors could deliver on that. So I thought it was a good balanced piece about some situation. Nonprofits are all going to have a lot of trouble, as well as we rely on some of these nonprofits that provide pretty important local services. And they're going to have their own troubles. They're going to have their own troubles with funding. They're going to have their own troubles with workers who get sick, or workers who shouldn't be around seniors right now, or shouldn't interact. Or how does that work? How do we make those decisions about who somebody's being helped or being put at risk? The first job is to take care of yourself too. So it's a really it's going to be an interesting few weeks as these support agencies try to stand up and provide all these services that they have been, plus more, because everything's so crazy. So if you have any experience like that you want to talk about, that'd be great. Finally, Jesse Marks had a great piece today for Voice San Diego, how cannabis went from being, think about it, the convention center went from being this big economic driver that may help fund homeless services to becoming a homeless shelter. It's like, well, it's just cut out the middleman, just take care. And then, and now marijuana, cannabis has gone from being illegal, not allowed, you're not supposed to have it, to now it's an essential service that's remaining open. And I just love that. That's like a fascinating story within a couple of years. I guess it was 2016 when we made that vote. So the convention center's gone from, this big economic driver of all these, the urologist conference and Comic-Con, to now it's like, well, we could maybe make some money off it and pay the homeless shelters, or help people take care of our homeless neighbors, or maybe just move them in. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry to make light. This is awful. It's just, it's, how else do you just like process all of the craziness and all how things have changed? So Jesse did a really good piece about how they're maintaining access to cannabis over this period, and how basically the state kind of said like, hey, you can just close these if you want, and you can, or these local governments can keep them open, and mostly they decided to keep them open. So the writer of the piece is the inimitable Jesse Marks. He's just a great sort of general freelance, or not freelance, an investigative reporter, so general assignment kind of thing. He does great work on a lot of things. He's tracked surveillance issues. He's tracked. He did a great series last year about police officers who'd been accused or convicted of crimes, but had a little bit different experience with the criminal justice system maybe than others. And he's done a lot of work on surveillance issues, on drones. Well, it's really interesting stuff. So he did a piece, Jesse Marks, on this, how cannabis went from being illegal to essential. So I got to come up with my politics report today. So if you have any suggestions on that, politics. It was always, so every Saturday I put out the politics report with Andy Keats, and we try to come up with tidbits, our own observations from the week about campaigns, about different policy discussions and debates, and then this happened, and this is everything. I was helping edit the morning report the other day, and there's always a section in the morning report that we put out. It comes out every morning at 5 a.m. And there was, at the bottom section of it, it's always like, in other news. And I was trying to help fill that out a little bit. Our managing editor, Sarah Libby's been amazing. I should introduce you to her soon. She's, been working really hard. And so I was trying to fill in and put in the in other news section. And I was like, what other news? What other news is there? Like, every other bit of news is affected by this. Your kid's softball league news is affected by this. Everybody's news is affected by this. And so it's like, in other news, I don't know any other news. I mean, we are tracking still some investigative work we've been doing on different things that we're not going to give up. But, and there still needs to be eyes on a lot of other things, but all those other things are affected by what's happening. I was talking to somebody today who knows city finances really well, and they're like, well, there are so many spigots of city, the city gets checks all the time, or transfers all the time, and there's so many spigots that have just like shut off. They've shut off, like the hotel room taxes. Like you go from like getting a lot of hotel room taxes to getting none, like not just a little or going down, none, like very, very, very small amounts. And so also he was pointing out, like, the city gets a lot of sales tax dollars, right? So city sales tax often comes also from gas taxes, and gas is cheap and nobody's buying it right now. And they might be getting a lot more, they might be getting a lot more, grocery taxes for some types of grocery items, but a lot of those aren't taxable. And how long is that going to last? And then there's other implications. The city gets money from like franchise fees from like SDG&E, right? A percentage of how much energy the city uses is a sort of tax for the city. And well, if like the big hotels aren't running their air conditioning at the same level or whatever, like the usage might go down, stuff like that. Like all those things are. And then there's places like SeaWorld. SeaWorld's rent to the city is based on its revenues, that it gets. So if SeaWorld, remember when all that stuff with the movie and the orcas was going down, Blackfish, we were watching, we could see the effect of the movie on SeaWorld, despite what they were telling us what the effect was, which was that it's no effect, which looking back is crazy. But we could see the effect based on the lease revenue that SeaWorld would pay the city. You could go see how much money they paid the city and then, use math to figure out how much the place made compared to times before. And so the point being, like, SeaWorld's not making money, so it's not going to pay any rent to the city. The Mission Bay hotels, they all pay rent to the city. They're going to start asking for relief, as they did yesterday. Lisa Halverstadt, by the way, is the expert on all these things, SeaWorld and Mission Bay leases and stuff like that. And they've asked now for their own moratorium on paying the city rent. So it's like a lot of really fascinating things happening right below the city, but they all basically point to this is a really weird time. Sorry, you might hear some buzzing. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but we've been doing some work on the house, because that's what you do now is you tear up your bathroom a few days before a global pandemic, and you need a bathroom. So it's a thing that people, they need them, especially people that have to go to the bathroom really bad and haven't prepared to wait. So so anyway, that's the buzz you might hear. But there's just so many different ramifications. One thing that we're going to be following really close is San Diego Unified School District and some of these other school districts. San Diego Unified asked the state for about $50 million to support this transition to this remote learning they're doing, and all the stresses they're facing from all of this. And that's going to be really interesting, because they're going to start to try to provide a virtual distance learning service and make sure that people who couldn't get access to devices or to have the kind of Zoom call that we just had with my son's third grade teacher, like, if you don't have those devices, they're going to try to identify that and make that happen. And so they're saying we need $50 million. Well, San Diego Unified was already projecting about an $80 million deficit, even when things were comparatively good. So it's going to be a little tight. It's going to be a really difficult, time for them. And so I think that they're going to work really hard to try to make the case to the state that they get a significant, I wouldn't say bailout, a way to bridge this time period. So in that same sort of press release, Los Angeles Unified announced that they were already spending $100 million to make sure that kids had total access to all the same devices. So, and there's a lot of concerns school districts have too about making sure that kids with special education needs and others are connected. So, with the same level of service that they deserve. So, it's a fascinating time. I think we're all basically these government officials are going to be making some extremely difficult decisions over the next several months about what services get cut, about what employees may get furloughed, or what deals they can make, contracts or layoffs. And with those decisions come like immense responsibility, right? There's like, you're talking about cuts to certain services. You're talking about cuts to the ability to process permits, or various things that have themselves economic consequences down the line. And so we're not talking about like scooters anymore. Whether we should ban scooters or wear helmets. No, we're talking about, do you keep parks open? How many employees do you keep employed? How many what level of services at rec centers, how many police officers can you hire? How many firefighters can you hire? How fast can you expect emergency responders to get to medical emergencies? We're talking big questions now. And you look back at like even what some people were talking about just 3-4 months, just a month ago. And you're like, yeah, that's not a thing anymore, right? Like, there's a meme going around that all these places, New Orleans, for example, is going to start to see a deluge of rental homes, because all of these, Airbnb vacation rentals were, there's no vacationers, so they're putting them on the rental market, and that could have a supply effect of actually lowering the rent costs in an area, which has been the theory of people who've, of course, opposed these these vacation rentals for a long time. So I think a lot of us are wondering, does that actually have an effect here too? Like what impact could that have? But it also sort of takes that issue completely off the table. Like that would be almost it's a kind of an insane thing for me to even talk about right now. So it's that's just an interesting thing as well to watch. So we recorded our podcast yesterday. That of course comes out every Friday. We weren't able to connect Sarah this week for some reason. So Sarah Libby, our managing editor, me, Andrew Keats, our assistant editor, talk about the week's news. We're going to gradually ease back into getting guests on. We're trying to make sure we do right by recording virtually like that or remotely. So we'll try to get some guests on soon for that. If you'd like to join me on one of these live broadcasts, we're going to work on trying to get them on more platforms as well. That seems actually pretty easy too, in a way of patching people in. So I've actually got some people lined up, I think, too, who might want to do that could help us kind of put in perspective emotionally just how to grasp all these things and how to focus on getting through this, because this is kind of my way of talking to you all too about how we're all going to take it step by step and day by day to get through this, because it's gonna be something we're just gonna have to daily talk about, I think. So anyway, yes, Padres. Did anybody watch last night? They've been replaying some games on Fox Sports San Diego, and I remembered last night. I'm like, oh yeah, I can turn some baseball on, and it can feel like normal, like baseball, like how it's on the background. It's just kind of a soothing like noise and call. Well, they had it on. They had one of the games against the Nationals last year where the Padres won with a walk-off from Austin Hedges, and they had like Franmil Reyes up there batting, and I was like, oh man, remember San Diego where Franmil Reyes played for the Padres and they just played baseball and you got to watch it whenever you wanted. It's usually on. Like that was nice. That was a fun version of San Diego. That was a good version. So I think we can get back to that. But I didn't really get that sad. It just did feel weird. You couldn't help but watch it all the time and be like, oh yeah, this isn't real. Oh yeah, this isn't real. Oh yeah, this isn't real. This is not happening. It's like, oh well. Franmil was the best. I loved Franmil. I don't know. He was just that song he did with the Dolly Parton, Whitney Houston. I Love You thing. I played that 1,500 times on my computer. That was good stuff. Just an infectious guy. So of course he's not a part of our lives anymore. He's with the Indians, and now we don't play baseball. But well, look, everybody, let's stay safe, especially all you folks in the Democratic Party who everybody who is struggling with this disease or is on the front lines of it. I have some friends. I have a friend who's a doctor who I've been thinking about a lot. Like, he's emergency room. Like he's definitely feeling the nerves, and so everybody who's out there, with a role in this, we're with you. We care about you, and we want you to know that we're supporting you, and we'll put pressure on the government and other people to make sure that they do right by you too. So that's kind of part of our role as well. So, and then secondly, on people who are trying to keep businesses going right now, trying to keep a restaurant going, when all these types of things that people are trying to keep people employed, keep their nonprofit going. Like, I'm with you too. Like that's a very important part of serving the community right now. And people who are keeping their families healthy, taking care of people who are in their families who need help. That's been great. So, all right. Well, let me know if you have any thoughts. You can find me on Twitter at VOSDScott. You can also send me any email you want, scott@voiceofsandiego.org. And please consider supporting our reporters out there doing all these interesting stories about the city. You can go to voicesandiego.org/donate. We're going to be trying to raise some money next week. So we've got to keep going. So thanks for everybody's support on that. And have a good weekend and try to find some relaxation.